Good evening. So today we're going to continue our series on emotions. I want us to talk about one we've talked about many times, but I feel like I'd be amiss if I did not include love in our list of emotions to look at and study. And wouldn't you think that of all the emotions, the emotion of love, you would think would be the most simplest and most straightforward, I think, of the emotions. But of course, we know that's not the case. The emotion of love and living a life of love can be complicated. There are all kinds of love that we read about throughout the Bible and we know about from our culture. You've got the romantic love, family and friendship love. There's the things we love, like our pets or sports, hobbies. And there are things we should love and there are things we should not love. And so the question that always comes up is love a feeling or is it a decision? Is it an emotion or is it an action? And so consider for a moment all the confusing messages that we have out there in our culture from music, TV shows, or movies, and all manners of media. And by far, the majority of all songs written and recorded are about romantic love relationships. The Queen has that one crazy little thing called love. You know that one? Know that song? A few of you do. Elvis Presley, I like this song. Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. I like that one. And then Tina Turner's What's Love Got to Do with It? Or the Righteous Brothers. You've lost that love and feeling. I think we would all agree love can be, as many of those songs say, a little over top, maybe a little crazy. And that when you take a chance on loving someone, your heart, we know it can be broken. But just a second-hand emotion, is that what love is? Is it nothing more than feelings? And if you lose that loving feeling, is it really gone? And what about not being able to keep from falling in love? And that question, can it be wrong even if it feels right, as many people say? So as we navigate yet again through all the confusing and emotional charged stuff, I think we can see that in our culture, the way our media presents things, it makes it difficult. As we've been talking a lot about in the series, we're not only looking at this for ourselves, but recognizing how a lot of folks in the world deal with these emotions, and then that they don't deal with the emotion. So many people have a confused or a skewed look at what love is, and they don't fully comprehend or understand or completely miss the mark on what the kind of love God wants us to focus on. And so, before we jump into that, I want to say again, throughout this series, I've been trying to remind us, emotions are a gift from God. God's created us with that capacity. And when it comes to these things, we need to avoid those two extremes. On one hand, there's the extreme of embracing the emotions and going all in and letting emotions rule our lives. And then the other extreme is to push it away and almost have this stoicism type of attitude toward it with no emotions at all. We can err on the side of making emotions everything, or we can err on the side of turning them off completely. So the right and healthy approach to our emotions is to take them seriously without handing the keys to our lives over to them. Maybe the emotion where we need that truth the most is this emotion on love. What does God's word say about it? Is love a feeling or is it an action? When we take a look at the Bible and see what it says about love, we'll discover it acknowledges love is both an emotion. It's also an act of the will. Intuitively, we recognize emotions are an essential part of love, but they're not the foundation or the determining factor of love, are they? Affections are part of the essence of love. But true love is not a feeling by which we are overwhelmed. Rather, it is a thoughtful decision. It is a sincere commitment. Over the years, a lot of people have talked about the 4 types of love. I've brought them up. You've got those 4 Greek words for love: eros, storge, phileo, and agape. Only 2 of these words are actually found in our Greek Bibles, phileo and agape. But the other 2 kinds are expressed in concept, even if not in word. So I want us to spend just a few minutes looking at each one of these and defining them. We're even going to take a look at the concept of eros. That's the romantic love. This is the kind of romantic love that happens between only a man and a husband and a wife. God's given us that as a gift. It's to be experienced in the marriage. But it's assumed, when we look through the Bible, it's assumed that romantic love is there even though it's not mentioned. You got Adam, Eve, Noah, Mrs. Noah, Abraham and Sarah, and Moses and Zipporah, Joseph and Mary. And we know about them, but we don't know much about their warm feelings or their attraction toward one another. We know Jacob loved Rachel. We can hope she loved him back. We know their union was hard won, and there was a lot of complications and ups and downs. And of all those marriages, or out of all those, they were all likely arranged marriages, which is very different than how we do things in our Western culture today, where romance and attraction, all these things play a big part in these roles. So when we see biblical examples of romantic attraction, eros is often seen in a negative light, isn't it? Amnon fell in love with his half-sister Tamar. David fell in love with Bathsheba. Many others we could probably bring up that's found all throughout the Bible where people fall in love, right? And create problems for themselves and many others. But there is a section in the Bible, the Song of Solomon, that we generally don't mention too much, don't talk about that much, where we see this example or put forth. I just want to read a sampling from Song of Solomon chapter 4, verse 1 says, "How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil, your hair like a flock of goats." How do you like that one? They have descended from Mount Gilead. I'm sure back in that day and age, that was quite the thing to say to her. But what we're seeing here is a man beautifying, talking lovely and compassionate words towards somebody he is romantically interested in. He's writing a poem. So men, when was the last time you wrote your wife a poem or your girlfriend? I've done it. It's been a while. But we ought to do things like that. That's the spice of life. Do things like that for our spouse. But we do see that there are some clear limitations that should not be the sole basis of marriage. That is, some groups, some groups ought not to be engaging in this stuff if they're not married. Eros is for the married couple only. The emotions involved in this kind of love are transient. That means they're subject to change. They're easily transferred. That is, subject to temptation. That's what happened to David with Bathsheba. And this kind of emotion easily comes and goes and differs in intensity, doesn't it? We see that emotion crop up. How well did David deal with it? He didn't. We see it happening with others as well. And that's why emotions can't be the engine that pulls the train. It needs to be tempered with the mind of the person to recognizing what those emotions are and engaging them properly. Another concept of love in the Bible is the concept of storge, called natural affection or familial affection. It's the kind of emotional love that comes from kinship. God certainly experiences and expresses this kind of love for insofar as he is our heavenly parent. We are his adopted children. He expressed this concept in his relationship with Israel as well. Jesus talked about this in his relationship with or in relation to Jerusalem when he was up on that hill and he looked down upon them and he longed to gather his people of Jerusalem as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. That concept's seen there. And there are two times when the form of storge appears in the New Testament, and both times it's expressed in the negative as well. Romans 1, at the end of the chapter, God has given his people over there to their corrupted minds, their corrupted lust, which leads to a list of all kinds of sinful behaviors, including being unloving. Or, as some translations say, without natural affection. This is toward your kinship. And this is the sort of thing that was happening in Israel. It was happening there in Rome and amongst the Christians there as well. You know, and it's happening in our country as well. How strong is the kinship in our country as opposed to about 50 some years ago. It has greatly weakened, hasn't it? We're very divided. We don't have the kind of loving kinship of unity as we've seen before in the past. When people have natural affection and familial affection, then they have love in their hearts for family members, and they act according to that love toward one another. But when we become more self-centered, when we become more focused in on self, we lose that affection. And that is a big problem. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. When I look out in our country, in our society and culture, I see one that is moving away from a family or kinship mentality and moving toward just self. I know right now they're talking about banning that app called TikTok. Oh, yeah, I got that look from the teenagers. TikTok is not a good app. It's bad. They design that to try to pull you in. They watch and they examine, they have algorithms to see what kind of videos you are looking at, and they feed you more, but they're all with the concept of pushing you in a particular direction. It's a very, very self-absorbed app. It's to keep us looking into self and to not have the unity that we once had in this country. It's to continue that idea of just self and no one else. The kinship in this country is dying, or maybe it is already dead. I don't know. But it's not good. We need to, as many have said, where is it at? Oh, I left it over there. Those cell phones, we need to get rid of them. We need to be able to put them down. We need to go on a fast, right? And put them away. How many of you, think about it this, how many of you at the dinner table, when you're sitting there with your family, have the phone out? How many of you, maybe when you're in the car with your family members or friends, you have your phone out? Or wherever it might be. How important has it become to you? Does it trump? Is it something that you pull out or look forward to more than your friends and your family? Something to think about. The third word for love that appears in the Bible is philia or phileo. And it is the word, this word for love is found in several forms, a verb and a noun. It appears about some 30 times in our New Testament. It's commonly used with reference to friendship. When you combine the word phileo and adelphos for brother, you get the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, right, that we have in Pennsylvania. Phileo was the word Jesus used for his love of his friend Lazarus, his love for his disciples in John chapter 20. In Romans 12, Paul uses a Greek word that combines philia and storge together to be translated as devoted there in the New American Standard, or brotherly affection in the English translation, ESV. And this kind of friendship love is shared between people who are drawn together as friends because of common interests or personalities or mutual experiences. It's been said that we can't choose our family, but we can choose our friends, and they become special relationships to us, that phileo kind of love. And then finally, the last Greek word is the word agape that we know so well. The Greek word for agape appears the most in our New Testament, over 300 times. It is the sacrificial, unconditional love of God. And in our New Testament, it is the highest form of love. But what's interesting about that, outside the New Testament, the word is rarely ever used. You don't see agape used much in the Greek text anywhere else outside of the New Testament. So it's the New Testament understanding of that unique nature of God's love, not the word's usage in the Greek-speaking world of the first century. That gives the word agape its special meaning. The New Testament did. In the Greek world, what was agape? It was nothing. It wasn't not important to them. But this is a word that describes God's love. For God so loved the world, John 3:16. It's the kind of love that God expects that we will practice. And we're commanded to love God. We're commanded to love one another with that agape love. It's the word that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, saying that love is patient, is kind, and a whole host of other things. Husbands are commanded to agape their wives as Christ agape the church. It is with this agape love that we are commanded to love our enemies as well. And this kind of divine love that God has and that we are called into practice is not a feeling, but it's that commitment, isn't it? Of a sacrificial type of our action. It is giving to someone what they need the most when they deserve it the least at a great personal cost to ourselves. If God was commanding us to feel a certain way rather than to act a certain way, he would be putting a burden on us that we could not bear. How many of us could feel like loving an enemy? We couldn't do that. That's not possible for us to do. God would be asking us to do the impossible. True agape love is an action. It's not a feeling. It is choosing to act in the best interest of another person at our own expense. Marriage is able to survive its ups and its downs when both the spouses are determined to love one another, regardless of feelings or personal cost. Church families are able to thrive when agape love reigns amongst all the people. And this kind of love wins and it conquers. It conquers you first, and then it captures the hearts of others who experience that love from you. Now, to say that agape love is the highest form of love is not to say, I'm not trying to say that all those other kinds of love are insignificant or trivial. We've already discussed God created romantic love. He created the love of families and natural familial affection. He created the connection for friends and the phileo love, to live in a community. So I'm not trivializing those kinds of love by saying agape is the highest form of love. But these other forms of love are significant. They are meaningful, but they all kind of blend in or bleed over and overlap one another in some way or another. Some kinds of love can be present simultaneously in certain relationships. I believe agape love is needed at some measure in every one of these, in eros and storge and a phileo. But when our relationships are built on agape love, then all the other ones thrive. All genuine love comes from God because God is love. He's the biblical definition of it. If God is love, we ought to love others in the same way he loved us. Could you imagine phileoing somebody, like a friend or a family member, and yet so they do something to upset you or make you angry, and you don't want to talk to them? And so that phileo goes away for a moment. That's the ups and the downs. But it's the agape love that keeps you together, doesn't it? To keep that friendship, that family kinship moving forward, to get us over the difficult times in our lives. If you don't have the agape love, all the other ones become unstable. They need to work together. Paul tells us in Ephesians 5, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. The followers of Christ, you and me, we are to be known by the way we love. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And where does true love come from? It comes from God. He pours it into our hearts by the Spirit of Christ, the fruit of the Spirit. So God is love. His love has been poured out into our hearts. And so I pray that we all recognize, know this, and allow this to permeate us. We desperately need to practice his love in all our relationships. As we mentioned many times, there are so many people out there in the world don't know how to deal with their relationships. Marriages are constantly falling apart. Friendships don't last long. All kinds of relationships when it comes to family or friendships or marriages are not lasting out in the world. And the main reason is because they don't understand what real love is. They know what love is. They may not know the word phileo, but they understand that concept. They understand the concept of eros. They understand the concept of storge and all these other relationships. But as far as agape goes, they don't have it. And since they don't have that in those other love capacities, they'll become unstable. And they don't know how to fix it. Maybe I need to love them more. Maybe I need to change the way I look. Maybe I need to change this or change that. But as far as the agape love goes, it's non-existent in their life. And so they struggle, don't they? How are they going to learn? Will there be a government program to help them learn what that is? No. Will they learn it in their public school system? Afraid not. They're going to have to learn it from you and me. Do we want to change the direction of this country, of our culture? We can vote all kinds of different people in all day if we want. But until we change the heart, the minds and hearts of people, it's never going to change anything. It's never going to move in a direction toward God. Until they begin to learn how to deal with those emotions, start acting out in their life the way God wants them to from the Bible, nothing is going to change. We'll keep moving in the same direction we're moving in. You know, in the introduction, I did mention that there are some things we should not love, or that we should not love too much. For instance, we're not supposed to love the world or the things of the world. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. The world and the things of the world that John was talking about are the sinful things of this world. He's not saying we cannot appreciate the beauty of God's creation, but we can't love sin. We can't love sinful activities. Another way to wrongly love is to love anything or any person more than God. Jesus said, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." We have to keep our priorities. Yes, we should love our parents and our children very much, but our love for them and the place of priority they have in our lives should never be greater than that of God. And so I want us to learn that love is an emotion. We talk a lot about how it's an action, it's a verb. We choose to do it, but there's also the emotion aspects of it. But all four of those work in conjunction together. Without agape, the other ones will not thrive. So if you're struggling in a relationship with somebody, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's a parent-child relationship, if you're struggling there, maybe it's the agape love that is missing somewhere in that relationship. So we need to take a look at that, be prayerful about it. It is only with God's power that we can act lovingly, even when loving feelings have grown cold or they're buried under pain. But with His help, looking at the Word, we can keep living a life of love, whether we feel like it or not. And when we act lovingly, while not feeling those emotions of love, we're not acting hypocritically, because obedience to God's Word is never hypocrisy. Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." He said the most important commands are to love God and to love your neighbor. And so we need to love God with all our hearts. We need to live a life that's really full of that kind of love that we see in Christ, that we see in Jesus. I feel like, and I know this is something that I have always struggled with, I sometimes get too robotic in my walk. I'm going to focus on agape love. And I don't stop to think about how that works in conjunction with the other relationships as far as the phileo and the storge goes. That is what helps maintain those relationships when they're in those downs and even in the ups. We struggle with those. I think we all do, one time or another. Have you ever got upset or in an argument with a family member at the dinner table? Have you ever had a kid storm out on you, or somebody else get upset and leave? Or maybe at work? There's relationships there that will struggle. What's going to help them overcome it? It's going to be that agape love, learning to deal with the emotions and deal with it properly, to be able to see what's happening there and then immediately fall back on the agape love when the other ones begin to fail. And when people see us do that, they will learn something from you. Maybe they'll ask you a few questions. Maybe there'll be a door of opportunity. But whatever it is, at least they're seeing the kind of life God intends us to live. And that kind of life is what brings the joy and the peace of life that everyone longs for, but no one knows how to get, because it's not taught anymore, at least not in our culture. It's up to you and me. We get a handle on it first, and we can be that light to the world. Let's think about that.